Okay, use your model. So now we're going to use the model, which is a fancy word for equation, to convert. So we have 17 pounds. Remember that x is pounds, k of x is kilograms. So we want to find k of 17 pounds, which means that's 4 ninths times 17 plus 1 ninth. Tell me what it is. To three significant figures, we get 7.65 kilograms. We want to convert 25 kilograms into pounds. Kilograms to pounds means that we are plugging in 25 not for x, but for what we think of as y. Y, in this case, is k of x. So I'm going to replace k of x with 25. K of x is the number of kilograms. That is the number of kilograms. 25 kilograms replaces the number of kilograms. You can solve this algebraically if you would like, or you can use numerical solve. The option's up to you. For pounds, we get to three significant figures, 55.6 pounds. Our last example is going to talk about our calculator. As we're creating models, and we've already seen in previous tests that this is a skill that we need to know, as we're creating models, we're going to notice that systems of equations are going to be things that happen a lot. And we're talking about lines here, so let's talk about systems of linear equations. We have two ways to solve systems of linear equations. The first one is to graph it in your graph. Well, okay, we have three ways. The first one is to graph it in your graphing calculator and find the intersection. And we're going to go through how to do that. The second one is that you can use the system of linear equations calculation on your calculator to solve it for you. You don't even have to graph it. It just tells you this is what the intersection would be if you were to put it on a graph. The third way is to solve it algebraically. How we solve it algebraically is we isolate for one variable, we plug it in for the other equation and solve. Once we get for one variable, we have to then solve for the other variable. You guys have spent lots of time, I believe ninth grade is when you guys learned this. You guys have spent lots of time learning and practicing it, doing by algebraically. You will always have your calculator for the IB exam. So let's talk about how to use your calculator in the IB exam. So it says first sketch, and we're going to sketch using our graphing calculator. We'll see the first way that we want to learn how to do this, which is to graph it. Turning on my calculator. If you're in the scratch pad and you want to go over to the graph, you can just click through this guy and it scooches. I already have something drawn in here. I double click in the white space and it brings me to, notice it says F2 of X. There is an F1 of X. If I just press this up button, it brings me to what I just graphed. There's more than one way to get to this point. I'm going to press escape. I could also hover over the graph that's already there and double click on it. I could also do menu, graph entry, function, and it brings me to F2 and then I scroll up and do that, but that's, I think, the hardest way to do it. But anyway, we want to delete that guy, so I delete it, press enter. Now I want to graph. I'm going to graph this guy first. I'm going to double click in the white space. It brings me to a function. If it doesn't automatically bring you to a function here, go to the graph entry, because sometimes it might look like this, rel, which means relation. If you're inputting, now that we've talked about function versus not function, we can now graph relations. TI-84s cannot graph relations. TI-Inspires can. So that's interesting because we do want to find and graph things that are not functions, like circles, we want to graph them, ellipses, we want to graph them, hyperbolas, we want to graph them, but they're not always going to be functions. So that's how we graph it. If you want to put it into a function, you just need to go back and have it be like that. This is already in y equals, and this is already in y equals. So now all you have to do is put in the other half of it. Enter. Ta-da! And then the next one, I'm going to double click on the white space. It automatically brings me to the second line of text. Again, if I scroll up, my first one's there. I can scroll down. And I've got this guy right here, so 0.5x plus 7. Whoops. I don't see it at first, and that is okay. What I said is I know that that's going to be my y-intercept. I notice that my y only goes up to 3.2, which means it's out of frame. That thought process might not come naturally to you. So instead, what I want you to do is don't ever panic when you don't see something. You just need to figure out what's going on with the zoom. And so zooming out should always be your first option if you don't see something. Menu, zoom, out. Notice you've got a little minus magnifying glass, which is like taking it out. So if I press enter, I zoom out. I can keep pressing enter as much as I want. You don't have to go back in and press zoom out, enter, go back in, press zoom out, enter. You can just keep pressing enter, 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 enter until you see it. I already see it, so I'm not going to keep pressing enter, but it is there. You can move your function labels if you want. Notice that there's a little hand. If you see that little hand, that means you can grab it. How you grab it is you click and you hold until it's pinched, and then you can move it. Ooh, that was not the one I wanted to, but that's okay. I just put that there. Then press it. I want to find that intersection. The solution to a system of equations, the solution to two lines is where they intersect. Because if you have those two lines that are equal to each other, then the only place where they will be equal to each other, that their pattern will result in the same outcome, is where they intersect, where exactly that point, that x value and that y value are the same for both. So the solution to a system of equations is the point. So I want to find that point. Menu is always the first place that we go to. I want to analyze the graph, and I want to find the intersection. If you're somebody who likes instructions, if you're somebody who likes steps, I would recommend going back and writing out these steps. To find intersection, menu, 6, 4, right? Menu, analyze graph, intersection. If I want to solve for a system of equations using the system of equations calculation, this is like, right, like just write out little steps for yourself. You could even put them on little note cards and have little like calculator note card help and have a little section where the note cards are. Here's how you do this on a calculator. Here's how you do that, because I will not re-explain it. So you need to know how to do it, or you need to know how to use Google to have Google re-explain it to you. Okay, that point right there is the only point in the world that has the same output for one, same input and same output for two different lines. That is the only point for these two different lines that has the same input and the same output. That is the only solution to this system of equations. Finding the intersection. The intersection is 2.33, 8.17. There's a lot of space here. You could write your instructions here as well, although I'm really starting to like the idea of a little system of note cards. That is the first way that we talked about. You can graph it and find your intersection. We talked about the third way, how it's algebraically. If it's something you feel confident on, fantastic. If it's not something you feel confident on, but you want to feel confident on it, if you're taking the ACT, SAT, there is a non-calculator section, so you might need to feel comfortable. You will need to feel comfortable on solving for equations. Then there's lots of practice out there for you to do that. IXL, Khan Academy, they're all there. The second way is using your calculation button to solve for systems of linear equations. Now this is algebra, right? Solving for something, it's algebra. So when you open it up, you go to algebra. Remember our numerical solve? Our numerical solve solves things for us. You're solving a system of linear equations also solves things for us. You press enter, whoops. Ah, okay. You press enter on that guy, and it gives us this. We have two equations. Boom. The variables that we're using are x and y. You can change them to a and b. Maybe you have a and b in your system of equations somewhere. As long as then you type in a and b here into your equation, that's fine. But we will be typing in x and y, so I'm going to leave those x and y. Then I'm given two spots. This first spot, you type in the equation. I don't type f of x, I'm going to type y instead. I'm going to do y. Your equals button is next to the trig guy here. 2x. I'm going to do 2 times x. Actually, no, I'm going to do x and show you what happens. It works. Sometimes you get a syntax error, and the first thing that you need to look for is, do you need to write a multiplication symbol? Sometimes you need to go in and write a multiplication symbol. Sometimes your calculator understands what you're trying to do. But I've definitely had syntax errors on some of these algebra things that your calculator can do. And that is sometimes what the issue is that you need to actually type in multiplication. Hey, we get the same answer. That is a different way. I would recommend writing out your steps as you go through them, because it will continue to pop up when, like, oh, it's a system of linear equations. We all know how to use our calculator to solve the systems of linear equations. Go, right? And I won't re-explain it anymore. And so having like something somewhere, a set of notes somewhere that says this is how you do all of these calculations, is important. Okay, good job, Steve.